Hi, here Marcelo. I'm a student doing a master degree in sustainability and innovation. And today I have the pleasure to interview Marie-Claire and to get her perspective on responsible leadership. Marie-Claire, hi. Would you like to share more with us about you and your passion for sustainability and leadership? How it very briefly started.
Sure. Thank you so much for having me here. My name is Marie-Claire. I'm 24, studying sustainability and leadership, and I'm from Switzerland. And everything started by realizing how our natural world is changing. So I saw in Switzerland we have a lot of glaciers. I saw how the glaciers were melting. Also in winter, how there was little snow, and this made me feeling very sad and really depressed and frustrating. And that's why I'm motivated, and that's what how it started.
Thank you very much for sharing the start of this journey. So, the purpose of this interview is to get a new perspective on responsible leadership and to make the attendees of this Next Gen Lead program to think on actually what is responsible leadership for them and which competences are needed to make responsible leadership. And so, start also this journey. Marie-Claire, I know that you have a personal story that you would like to share with us regarding responsible leadership. Can you tell us more about this?
Absolutely. So I have been already mentioning how I started to become aware. And of course, the first thing what you're doing, you're changing yourself, your personal habits, you turn off the light, you try to save water and paper. But then I quickly realized this is all not going to be enough. And this then again made me quite frustrated because I thought I can change the world by changing my own habits. And then I quickly realized, okay, I have to do something more. So I went out. I'm coming from the countryside in Switzerland, so there's not too much going on where I live. Like I'm coming from a small village, but nevertheless we have a youth council. So I was starting in the youth council, trying to reach out to different stakeholders, seeing where we as young people can have an impact in a world which is mostly driven by the older generation, and there is not too much space actually for young people. So I was starting, and yeah, always with the aim of trying to save the planet. So this was always my motivation. But yeah, throughout the days, and I realized that I can change it from what I'm doing. So of course I was very engaged, and we can maybe change something very locally where I live. But this is not the biggest source of emissions. This is not where the power actually sitting. So when I moved for my studies to Zurich, which is the biggest city in Switzerland, I realized, oh, there are actually new opportunities. So I started to be engaged at the university, which is a very, very different world from where I came from. So there were new people, is a whole new network and also a whole new possibilities, which was very, very exciting to me to really deep dive in all these different possibilities, to explore whom to address and also what messaging is needed to bring across my message. Despite the aim is always the same, it's very important to explore who can actually help me to get one step ahead. But also then I realized, okay, one university is not enough. We have a lot of universities, so we have to keep going. And so I realized that there are more universities to contact. So again, this was a new step, going to explore new opportunities and possibilities in Zurich, but then also on a national level. And this also requires a very systemic thinking of realizing who is out there, who to target, and what is the messaging. And this really brought me to a very exciting journey. It's super interesting to see these different possibilities, but also see very often there are like some hidden stakeholders who can be really powerful, and I would have never imagined that they are there. And I think this is also what is really important as we as young people, because we can't just go innocently into a meeting and ask some questions which others might not be able to ask. But we can go in and say, like, who is actually responsible for this decision? And others, they might be afraid. And we as students, young people, have like a certain drive and a different position in the system. And this is exactly what we have been doing until to the highest level, until to the United Nations, that we came in and could be this innocent but radical, bold people with very ambitious goals. And yeah, this path took me further until the highest decision making in the country of Switzerland, where I was also part of the national Swiss delegation for the World Climate Conferences, but also then at the United Nations, all around the Sustainable Development Goals. And there, of course, you have a lot of leaders. Some are more responsible, some are less responsible, but it's really, really missing. And this is really bad. There are like so little young people. I mean, they're young people as observers, as activists, maybe as young researchers, but there are so little people as like in a leadership position where they can actually take a decision and influence decision making. And this makes me really sad. That's also why I'm thinking it's so important to have programs like these and also like in the universities, because ultimately what we need is young people who of course are on the streets and who are putting pressure on the government, as I'm also doing. I have been since the beginning with the climate strike, but we also need people, young people, who come in with this different drive, with this different knowledge into these decision-making processes. And also I think it's very important that we as young people are not just copy pasting the older generation, you know, and then we are just behaving and playing like they have been playing. This would be easier, but it's not the solution. And yeah, this was actually my like a shortcut through my journey of like how I started very locally, and then was basically an exploration of new relations, of new stakeholders, new possibility, with a very strategic but also systemic thinking on how to achieve my goal. And my personal goal to save the planet is not yet achieved, but I'm also not alone, and that's really great to have some allies in the system who are supporting. And I'm very excited for your questions, Marcelo.
Great. Thank you very much for sharing this part of your personal story. I found very interesting because you said that indeed youth might be on the streets, but sometimes youth is less represented in the international organizations. And also you were talking about stakeholder relation, and I believe that many times we have this perception that the leader is like the CEO or the person that is high level, and actually a young person can also be a leader. And my question is, how do you feel that as a young person it can engage differently the stakeholders? Like you were saying, asking questions that other adult people wouldn't ask. And which other ways do you see as a young person that you can do to engage more the stakeholders?
So I think one of our biggest advantages is that we, because we are new to the system and new to different meetings or hierarchies, we can kind of penetrate them because we don't have this hierarchic system like which is oppressing us. And young people often like get somehow through it. And I think this is very important, and we should use it very wisely. And very often we are, I mean, also myself, I have been very intimidated by this structure. When I came the first time to this United Nations meeting, you know, I prepared myself honestly for 1 month. I was reading every document. I was reading the whole Paris Agreement. I really thought, now I am like prepared to go there and talk and make. And then I ended up there, and you know, I was there for 1 week. I was running around. I was hungry, and I didn't understand them. You know, not it was English, but I just couldn't understand, and this was so frustrating. And this happens a lot to young people. And then what I think is happening, or what I see what is happening, that young people are getting frustrated, they get out of the system instead of staying there and being exposed and asking this question and being sometimes nasty and just stay, you know, persist and being exposed to this, because we have to overcome this like valley of not understanding, and then I think it's increasingly going up, you understand more, and it's really an exciting journey. So young people can always be the leaders, and we don't have to have all the knowledge in the world, but we have to, of course, understand what is going on. And then if we understand this, we can be really, really powerful, because we can bring people and opinions together who wouldn't talk necessarily before. We can question publicly certain countries, for example, at the United Nations, or certain stakeholders, very critical question, because we don't have a lobby behind us. Basically, we can speak very true from ourselves. And for protecting the planet, we don't have like the oil lobby and the banks and everyone behind us, and we have to like somehow fit our statements into all of this world, like their statements. We can be very, very like blunt and direct, and I think that's what makes us the leaders, because we are ourselves, we're true to ourselves, and we can hence act very responsible. And not like we are responsible to ourselves, but we are not responsible then to like all the other interest groups who might have very weird views sometimes on this problematics.
Yeah. So what have been the challenges that you face as a young leader on representing youth and representing youth in front of those already establishments and those stakeholders that indeed might have some partners or lobbies behind them and that want them to have an agenda?
Yeah, so I think the first one is really about myself. So I felt intimidated. I, in the beginning, was afraid of asking questions because I felt stupid and dumb. And I felt like, oh, I can't make a difference. And I actually shouldn't even be here in the first place because I don't understand. And this was all wrong. Like this, like led to me also for like limiting myself because I was not able to ask someone a question. And if there's like anyone I can give this advice, please don't go through this. Go and ask questions and say like, this is the first time I'm here and I really don't understand. I don't understand these abbreviations. And actually, if you're asking, you realize that they sometimes don't understand them themselves. And also, yeah, I really like people ask the questions and yeah, challenge the people there. And then the second challenge is really coming from the outside, from this hierarchic system, from this also very patriotic, male-dominated space, especially older people, where I, as a young female lady, are just by the system sometimes not recognized. So when I was representing Switzerland in the international negotiations as a negotiator, some people came up and like asked me like, oh, where is actually the negotiator? Like they assumed I'm the secretary to someone. I was like, I'm actually the negotiator here. So this can be also, of course, very intimidating and very feeling very oppressive because you worked hard to be there, you are really excited, and then someone is just not recognizing this. But again, here, I just had to learn to put this aside and being myself. And this is, of course, also comes, for example, sometimes through social media, you know, like there's like very like less barriers of just, yeah, sometimes doing very stupid comments. So I think also we as responsible leaders and leaders of the future have to understand and learn to to sort out like good critiques. There is a lot of very valuable feedback and critiques which we should take to our heart and act upon. But there is also just rubbish and bullshit out there. And sometimes we just have to say like, okay, this is not the way I'm talking with someone, and this is not how someone should approach me. And then we can just should be strong enough to just put it away into a box and then go ahead. And I think this, I would have really wished that someone would have told me this before in my story. And I really hope that this can help someone to overcome these challenges.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I listen. How, what has changed with your interventions? For instance, you were saying that the vocabulary for sometimes that you were using, you couldn't understand, and probably some of the people couldn't understand. Also, the structure was already very established, and so you couldn't fit in. And in all of this, what changed since you were participating in these meetings?
Yeah, so I mean, there is an amazing learning curve. I started as a very innocent student, you know, and I mean, now I can really say that I have learned so much from like the real world, like the negotiation, but also a lot about the facts. I mean, also about a lot about science, about climate sustainability, political science, but also a lot about psychology, human behavior, about countries, geographies, geopolitical understandings, cultural understandings. I have learned different like languages, like the language itself. I have improved also like the English, and not only like the small talk English, but the negotiation language itself. So there is an amazing learning curve. But also, I mean, I have been growing my network exponentially with allies, with enemies, with people I maybe wouldn't get along in the normal words. I wouldn't talk to them, but I was somehow exposed, so I had to respond or take a responsibility to talk to them when they have been opposing something. So there is like really an exponential growth in like in the community, in the stakeholders. But it also really opened my view how I approach certain things. In the beginning, I thought like the climate crisis is something very like technical, something like natural science. And over the course of the last years, I have been understanding that this is all based on social inequalities. And was also a new perspective. And I think this is also the most valuable when we are at this conference, that we understand different perspectives from people coming from a small island developing country. You know, they have a very different perspective. For them, it's about the survival. For me, it's of course also in the long term about the survival. But they have a very different story to tell. And I think this is so important to take this and also incorporate this in our messaging. when I have the chance to, for example, represent all the young, so there is one youth speaker, you know, and then I'm representing kind of everyone, or they expect that I'm representing everyone around the world. I mean, of course I can't, but I can at least take some of their messaging into my messaging, and try to give it a voice. And I think this is absolutely crucial. And this was my learning curve, but also just being not afraid of speaking up, taking the floor, asking a question. I mean, I was not naturally born to just do this. I was very shy and intimidated by all of this, and then I started to really open up. And yeah, and I think also what makes what we call also a responsible leader, taking stand and speaking up. So this was also part of my learning curve.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we can see how much you learned and changed in this journey. And so you are a lot in contact with stakeholders, which are probably considered as adult responsible leaders also. And so did you perceived or did you see any change on their own behavior?
Yes, absolutely. So I haven't been for that long in for example, the United Nations, or also at the university boards, or speaking at this high level meetings. But I know that some years ago, like, young people haven't been even listened to. So the young people were not invited. It was like, okay, let the experts talk, and you can read it in the media. You know, you are good in social media, you can read it there. And this changed. So young people are now proactively invited, not everywhere, but in many meetings. And I think now the next challenge is coming, that we are very often also tokenized. So there's like, oh, let's bring in someone young, you know, like then we have like the future voice and the young generation included. But, you know, like the decisions anyway taken, so we're not listening to them. And so this narrative changed. Young people are proactively invited, are trained, are sometimes taken into consideration. But I think now it's really about taking the next step, that young people are taking decisions, what I've been mentioning also before. As long as young people are not sitting where the decisions are taken and not having the mandate to take these decisions, it's very hard for this, like, older generation to listen to us, clap, say like, oh, thanks so much for all what you're doing, please keep it up, keep up the energy, it's so great, we appreciate, and then do exactly the same what they have been doing before. And this needs to change. We have to, like, even go further and penetrate the system even further.
Great. Thank you very much. So I will go for the last two questions. What would be the main message that you would like to send to the students that were watching us?
Yeah, I mean, I have been mentioning now also throughout when I was explaining my story, that I kind of lost quite some time because I was afraid of speaking up, and I was afraid of going to this, like, certain stakeholders and asking the critical question, because I felt intimidated that I was not good enough and I didn't know enough. And we just simply don't have this time. I mean, honestly, for the climate crisis, we have to act so fast. For the biodiversity crisis, for many other crises, I mean, the life of certain people are already under risk. So I really hope that that we can overcome this, and that, yeah, this challenge is not limiting young people when they want to engage. And yeah, the second one is really, like, also be proud of what you're doing, and don't limit yourself with like, oh, I don't belong here, and I maybe like someone else, or maybe the older generation, they can actually fix it, because you belong exactly there where you are, or even further. And just because the system is not allowing you to be somewhere, it shouldn't be a hindrance for you to not get there.
Great. Thank you very much for this advice. Do you have a practice, like a daily practice or something that you do that you would suggest for the students to start or to foster their journey on responsible leadership?
I think the most simple advice I can give is, like, asking questions. And I mean, you can do this everywhere. You can do this, like, practice in the family, with your partner, with your friends. But then also go, like, further, do it, like, in the classes, because very often, I mean, you're in classes and, like, who's asking questions? But barely anyone is asking a question. And very often, actually, the counterpart would be very interested to have a conversation. So, like, start it there. It can also be in the train. I mean, no, with COVID, it's maybe a little bit challenging. But anyway, like, just try to practice and asking the question, because I mean, like, sometimes even I'm, like, very, like, feeling unwell of asking a certain question. And I think we have to overcome this. And then when we do this practice on daily basis in, like, a normal routine life, we are also able to then ask the more challenging question when it comes that you have a meeting with the board of directors, when it comes that you have a meeting with the head of state and the ministers. and that you're then actually just on the spot and asking the right question. You can train this by asking everyday questions, challenging people in your daily life with asking a question.
Thank you. I will start to ask questions in front of my mirror. Thank you very much, Marie-Claire, for this interview. So I hope you spent a great time with us, and I invite you to participate in Next and Lead, and also to watch all the other interviews that we made with different responsible leaders from all around the world. So thank you,
Thank you
Marie-Claire.
so much. Bye bye.
Bye. See you.